Hello everybody, my name's Andrew. I'm a tree strategy manager for a local authority, and prior to that I used to work for the Forestry Commission as a woodland officer. And I'm here today to talk about food forests, which is my big passion in life, on the theme of nature. So what I'd like us all to do, first of all, is go on a little time travelling journey. We're going to go 8,000 years into the past to the Amazon rainforest. For any of you that were born after 1990, that's a DeLorean time travelling machine. And as you sort of get your bearings and look at the forest in front of you, you'll notice that you're in front of a grove of Brazil nut trees. And to all accounts and purposes, you believe that these trees just naturally appeared here over the course of evolution. We then come across a friendly tribe, an indigenous tribe of people, and they invite us back to their home, which has been made from timbers and fibres produced in the forest. And they invite us for something to eat. And as we're eating, you comment on how lucky they are to actually live so close to a grove of Brazil nut trees. And the elder shakes his head and he says, No. My ancestors planted this grove of trees generations ago. And they actually planted all of the other plants that have produced the food that we're eating today. That sets the scene for this talk. Obviously, I can't really take you back in time, unfortunately. So this is a 2017 paper that was published in Science, which is a peer-reviewed paper and very well-respected journal. And the authors of this paper essentially studied plants that surrounded archaeological sites that were pre-Columbian. That means they existed before 1492. And what they found, there was about 16,000 species of plant that they documented, but roughly half of the plants that were growing there were dominated by just 1%. 1% of the plants growing there took up half of the space essentially. And what they found is that many of these hyperdominant plants were domesticated plant species, which means that they were actually planted by humanity. They included things like Brazil nuts and one of Ranji's favourite plants, the cacao plant. And the study concluded by saying that modern tree communities in Amazonia are structured to an important extent by a long history of plant domestication by Amazonian peoples. So I just want you to let that sink in for a moment. The largest and most diverse terrestrial ecosystem in the world has at least been cultivated in part by humans over millennia. It's a system that's designed to produce food, fibres, building materials and medicine. It's provided for generations of indigenous people's needs without the need for industry, globalism or capitalism. And not only that, it also provides habitat for the most taxonomically diverse range of flora and fauna on Earth. Now, in the words of Ron Swanson, you might be wondering, what's your point? What's this got to do with a bunch of spiritually enlightened brummies? I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn in terms of building resilient ecosystems, in terms of using food forests to educate ourselves, to build community, and to essentially build food sovereignty. Now here's some facts. Try and commit these to memory because you may need to remember these later in the talk. So the UK imports 81% of its timber, which means proportionally we're the second largest importer of timber in the world after China. We're only 62% self-sufficient when it comes to food production. Domestic vegetable production, I was just going to say on that fact, so if we thought about food production in terms of a calendar year, we would actually run out of food in the middle of August if we were relying solely on food we produce ourselves. So domestic vegetable production is at its lowest rate since records began. Only 52% of the vegetables that were eaten in the country last year were grown here. And this is the saddest fact of all, just 16% of the fruit being eaten in this country is actually grown here, despite us having some of the most fertile soils in Europe. So in terms of resilience, I, as a forester, like to think of resilience in terms of a forest's ability to bounce back after, say, a fire, or if there's been a major pest and disease outbreak. But I think we can also apply resilience to our thinking when it comes to social ecological systems. And that means human systems that are basically embedded within nature, which of course all social systems are. And my big question really on the basis of those facts I just gave you is, is what we're doing currently resilient? I would argue that it isn't. So how can food forests help us in nature? Well, I don't want to present them as a panacea, like the whole solution, but I think that they can be part of our solution. Obviously, they produce food. And that example I gave you at the start, if they're designed well, they can produce food for generations of people. They bring communities together. There is an initiative called the Fruit and Nut Village, which is based in Birmingham, and they're actually planting food forests all over the southwesterly parts of the city at the moment. And that's getting people together to grow food together, and also they're learning together and developing their skills, not just horticulturally, but also how to actually live in community. They're educational. So in professional capacity, recently oversaw a project to plant a number of fruit trees in a residential area in Cannock, and we actually used, we engaged school children in that process. So we were showing them how to plant the trees, how to look after them, and also the importance of food sovereignty. And finally, they provide habitat for wildlife. This is taken from a paper that I had published last year. And what you can see here is an image that was included in the paper, and it shows you roughly the simple structure that you would have in a forest garden. In answer to your question, what is a forest garden? And what you can see here is that you have different layers, and it almost mimics the structure of a natural woodland. So the largest tree that we have there is an alder tree, Italian alder. Then we go down to the fruit tree layer, which is a Morello cherry tree. Then we've got raspberries making up the shrub layer. We've got sweet Sicily, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on, making up the herbaceous layer. And finally, at the bottom, we've got wild garlic. And there you can see a very simple illustration of the structure you would try and mimic in a forest garden. I also like to play around with open source design programs in my spare time. And what I thought it would be good to do is try and do an artist's impression of what this rather bland looking field in a park near to where I live could look like if we planted it up as a food forest with fruit trees, herbs, and fruiting shrubs, etc. And what's really interesting is that in this area last year there were 3,500 food parcels distributed to low-income families. And my calculations, using some data in a peer-reviewed paper, show that you could produce up to 415,000 calories with a food forest occupying this space. So that's surely got to build some resilience into the local area. This is Newton Road playing fields in West Bromwich, and I drive past that quite a lot when I'm visiting my parents. Again, it's just a big open space with just grass. It's not really serving anybody's needs, I would argue there. You can see down here, I've absolutely crammed it full of fruit trees, herbaceous perennials that go along the path. It's inviting people to come into it and use it as a space for recreation, but also, it's a brilliant space for invertebrates and pollinating insects, and there's an absolute glut of food potentially coming out of that. So hopefully you're all sold on the idea of a food forest, and now I'm going to try and talk you through how you could grow one yourselves if you wanted to. And I would say think about it in terms of either doing one in your own back garden or potentially getting together with some of your community and trying to find an open space like those ones and thinking about designing something there if the council will let you. So this is a design that I overlaid on a Google Earth image, and I think I would encourage everybody to sketch out how you want your forest garden to roughly look before you start planting anything. You don't have to use the computer. You could just get some crayons and some paper and sketch it out that way. And some things that you should think about that are really important. The first one is light, because most plants within a forest garden, fruiting plants and herbs, they love access to plenty of light. So make sure that you don't plant all of your plants too closely together. And when you're thinking about spacing, you want to think about the trees, because they're the main component of your forest garden. And a good rule of thumb is just to make sure that the canopies are not going to be touching when they reach their optimum height and width. But also think vertically as well as horizontally. So although you don't want your trees to, their canopies to touch, you may have space under the canopy of your tree for a fruiting shrub if it's not actually going to grow up to the canopy of the tree. Below that you could fit in some herbs, and then you could have some of these ground cover species that I'll talk through in a moment. And finally, I would just say, plant things that you actually like eating, because when it comes to harvest time, it's going to make it a lot more interesting for you. Now, this is where we get into prize time. I've got 4 plants here. That's all my budget could stretch to, I'm afraid. Asda? I should have got them from an independent retailer really, but I was pushed for time. So what I'm going to do is talk through each layer of the forest garden based on some of the plants that I've planted in my own garden, just to give you some inspiration. This isn't a definitive list of what you should plant, just to give you an idea. And if somebody can tell me what each of these plants are, then you can come up here and help yourself to one of these plants. So does anybody know what this is? Who said strawberry first?
Was the purple lady?
Yeah? Yeah, correct. So you can come and help yourself to a herb.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody know what this one is in the middle? Yeah, who said that? Well done. Yeah.
I said that.
Brilliant.
I think Jacqueline will shout it out. That's the game.
I'm trying to be nice.
She is. Let's see Jacqueline gets next one.
Do you want to come and help yourself, yeah? If anybody gets the last one, I'll give you 20 quid. Okay, I'll talk through these layers and then we'll go on to the next slide. So, yeah, basically, your ground cover plants, you want to put those in because they're going to essentially protect your soils from drying out. That's the main functional reason you plant them. And they're also going to crowd out weeds or other plants that you don't want growing there. And you normally, in forest gardening, it's a good rule of thumb to try and plant things that give you more than one function. So one function of the strawberry is that it's going to spread via its rhizomes and it's going to cover your garden, but also it's going to produce delicious berries that you can eat. And it's also going to provide space for pollinating insects. It's going to provide nectar for them. Wild garlic is a spring ephemeral, which you'll notice growing very early in the growing season. It's very pungently smelled and it's delicious as a salad green. Tastes just like a garlic bulb. And finally, over on the right there, we've got Nepalese raspberry, which is a non-native plant.
That's it.
It's actually very closely related to bramble, but it doesn't grow as high, so I find it less invasive in my garden, and I've planted that and it spread so quickly that within, say, 18 months, it had virtually covered the space that I wanted it to cover. So the next layer in your forest garden is the herb layer. So does anybody know what this is? And I've already mentioned it once. It is, yeah. Well, you've already had one plant, so I'm going to give the next one.
Sweet Sicily.
But well done. Yeah, that's Sweet Sicily, and this actually is another non-native plant, but it is very taxonomically similar to cow parsley, which you probably notice growing in the countryside. And the difference is cow parsley is very unpalatable, whereas this produces delicious little edible seed pods. and they can be used to sweeten things like yogurt or a dessert.
Okay, you can make sambuca.
Oh, yeah. I haven't tried that. Okay, does everybody know what this one is?
I want to say borage, but I don't think it's right.
No, close. That one is comfrey.
Oh,
That's it.
That isn't an edible plant, but it's what we call a mineral accumulator. And what that means is it's got really deep tap roots, and it mines the soil at layers where other shallower rooting plants can't access. And so it brings all those minerals up into its leaves, and then you can cut it twice a year, and those leaves will sort of slowly break down and release those minerals to the plants that are nearby. So you're essentially improving the soil by planting that plant, and the bees go absolutely wild for the flowers as well. Okay, this one?
fennel.
Well done. Yes, come and get yourself a plant.
I wanted to.
So you can make tea with fennel. It's also a nice little accompaniment to salads. It's got beautiful smell if you rub it between your fingers, and it's also a great pollinating plant. And then, anybody want to guess the last one there?
Is it rosemary? But it's not very picture.
It is rosemary.
Use the man at the front.
Well, we've got some more plants coming up, so.
I think it's rosemary.
No, rosemary is one of my favourite herbs because it's really nice to put on things like chicken or tuna. It like really adds some depth to the flavour. But it's always the first plant in my garden to flower, and the bees absolutely love it. So you could spend hours just watching the bees getting stuck into the nectar on rosemary, and it's really good for the bees to sort of power their colonies early in the growing season.
It's good for hair growth as well, but I'm not
Oh, is
sure
it?
if you knew that.
Well, it doesn't seem to be working on me. I might start rubbing it in. Okay, any takers on this one?
Gorse?
Close.
Broom. The other one that looks the same.
Who did you say, broom?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's broom, yeah. So you can have the last plant. Now, I didn't plant this plant. I actually tried to turn that into an alpine bit of the garden where it had little succulents because the soil was very sandy. But they didn't really like it there. And I noticed that the broom just suddenly started growing of its own accord. And I basically left it when I did a bit of research, because what I realised is this plant is a nitrogen fixing plant. It's got bacteria on its root nodules, and they actually convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen that can be taken up by the plant's roots. And when the roots die, as the plant progresses, it actually releases that nitrogen into the soil, which then has a facilitative effect on the plants that are nearby. So it's actually improving the performance of the plants around it as well. And it's another fantastic bee plant. So sometimes you've got to let nature take its course as well, rather than trying to control everything. This is raspberry, and they spread very quickly via runners as well, produce delicious fruits, brilliant pollinating plant. That's currant, and you can get white, red or black currant. You can make really nice cordials with the berries from those, and they're full of vitamin C, so it's really nutritious. And that plant over there is lilac, and again, that was already growing in the garden when I moved in, but I didn't remove it because I love the flowers. They smell amazing in the spring, and it just looks really pretty, so I left that one in there. The next layer, probably the most important layer, is the fruit tree layer. And what I would say is you want to use your fruit trees as the sort of focal point of everything else. You plant your guild of plants around your fruit trees. Here we've got an apple tree, and who doesn't love an apple? They're so versatile. You can make juices with them, they're eaters, you can make crumbles, all kinds of things you can do with apples. In the middle we've got a Morello cherry, which is a Serra cherry, and that is really good for inflammation, very good for arthritis apparently. And at the end there we've got an Asian pear, and that produces round pears rather than the teardrop shaped pears. And it's got a very distinctive, unique flavour that I actually prefer to the common pear. And it also grows in a multitude of soils and environments. It's a very resilient tree. And then finally is the canopy layer. And the canopy layer will give a little bit of shade to the other plants, but not too much. So you want to plant sort of species that have fairly open canopies. Now in my garden I've got the birch, and birch are brilliant pioneer trees. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by a pioneer tree. So there's a site near to where I live that had been tarmacked in preparation for development. And one day I went to that site and I noticed that a load of birches had started growing in the tarmac naturally, and their roots had started breaking the tarmac up. When I went back the next year, there was now like virtually a forest there, and the tarmac had been completely smashed by the roots of the birch, and it was basically reclaiming the site for nature. And so it's really good to have in a forest garden, because that also mines minerals and returns them to the ground when it loses its leaves in the autumn. And then finally on the right there, that is an Italian alder. That's not grown in my garden. I didn't plant one. I kind of wish that I did plant one now. I didn't feel like I had space for it at the time. And Italian alder is also a nitrogen fixing tree. So a lot of forest garden projects, you'll see Italian alder planted there. And so I just want to finish by showing you some pictures of me and my son at Walton Arboretum last year. This was at their apple day, and they've got a community orchard, a pretty big one, and they harvest the apples every year and they bottle it up and sell the juice at their apple day. And they have events like this guy was actually using a bike to mush up the apple into some kind of juice, and they had things on for the kids as well. And I think it's a really good example of how forest gardens and orchards can help to bring people together in a really purposeful way. And so I guess I'd just like to leave you with the idea that the people in the Amazon and what they did, what they've created there, is a real lesson for all of us. And I'd like us to take those sort of sentiments forward, and hopefully this will ripple out into some new forest gardens. Hopefully you'll feel like you want to go out and create one yourself. And thank you for listening.